All right. What are we doing now? Got a little bit of food and we'll watch some videos or something out. I'm not doing anything else. It is September and I'm happy about that. There's very little that makes me happy, but that is one of them. So I wanted to watch games that are better on a weaker console. And like GameSec, they consistently pull out banger episodes. Or he does. I miss Dave. Joe is cool too. Like, Joe knows his shit. For sure.
Hello and welcome to GameSec.
Yes.
A viewer suggested a topic which I think is pretty cool, and that's to take a look at games which are better on weaker hardware. So, for example, a game gets released on both 8 and 16-bit platforms, but it happens to be that the 8-bit one is the better game. Now, sometimes the gameplay isn't identical, so it could be cheating a little in some cases, but that's okay. This is all just for fun. Anyway, let's get started.
No. YouTube videos just for fun?
Sunsoft on the PC
Get out of here.
Engine.
Get out of
This
here.
has been on GameSack a few times, and most of you probably know that it was only released in Japan.
Internet has
For
fun
good
on it.
reason, too. There's just not a good Batman game here. Basically, you spend the game wandering around with an overhead view. In some
Never played it.
stages, you pick up trash. In other stages, you clean up graffiti. In others, you set time bombs.
That's what Batman
That sounds
does.
cool, but setting a time bomb uses the same
He has to
exact
clean up
gameplay
after
as picking
Banksy.
up trash. You just need to wander to a spot, Batman does his thing, and you move on. You can stun enemies
go.
and then get rid of them for several seconds by touching them. You can get power-ups to walk faster, shoot more batarangs, shoot them faster, and stuff like that. This helps because you're frozen in place when you shoot.
Well,
The
that's how
graphics
it
are
works,
okay.
right?
The console can definitely do a lot better than this. The music is
The
fantastic,
Batman
though.
sprite is like good, but it has way too much yellow on it.
In the end, it's a decent game, honestly, with tons of levels, but it's not what people expected when they bought a Batman game. It's especially perplexing
clean
since
up
it
the
was
town.
originally planned to be a side-scrolling adventure.
See, look at this sprite work here. It's so yellow. Like, I get it. It's from the old movies, which, you know, they have yellow, but like, I guess that other yellow part is supposed to be his belt. I don't know. It
Not sure why they
really
changed it.
stands out though. Especially when he's like turned. It's like ridiculously yellow.
Sunsoft also released Batman on the NES earlier that same year. This is a side-scrolling.
I have never played this, but I see a lot of people playing it, and it looks fucking fun as shit. And I've never played it. It looks incredibly like it has tight controls and stuff like that, like Ninja Gaiden.
Action platformer and a far, far better game. Instead of picking up trash and avoiding enemies, you attack them directly and kill them, which is what Batman is famous
yeah.
for. Wait, no, that's the Punisher. Oh well, he kills them in this
Same
game
thing.
anyway.
Don't worry
You
about
have multiple weapons you can select from with the start button, but each one is limited in use. They all share the same inventory stock, but certain weapons use up more because they're stronger. If you die, you start over with the same amount remaining, which can be a detriment if you get sloppy. Batman also has a super fun wall jump, and you need to use this strategically to get past each stage. Some stages require incredible precision with this move.
Like, I don't know how I
The game
missed
can
this
be
game.
quite frustrating the first few times that you play. I've always sucked at this game, as you can tell by my gameplay here. But if you put enough time into it, even you can make it to the part where you fight the Super Shredder. That is
Ooh.
Super Shredder, right? The graphics are dark and grainy, but certainly way more pleasing than another game I'll talk about later in this episode, which also features dark and grainy graphics. In fact, the graphics here are quite good for the console. Even better is the music. Sunsoft did no wrong on the NES when it came to music, at least in their
Sunsoft.
main releases.
There's a word or name I haven't heard in a while.
I'm pretty sure that this was originally a different game that they were working on before Sunsoft got the license, and then they did their best to put some Batman into it.
Hell yeah.
I mean, it's not much like the movie outside of the cutscenes. Oh, and the end boss here, I guess. Ouch. Perhaps that's the story of the PC Engine version of Batman as well. I think the only Batman game based on the 1989 movie that Sunsoft designed from the ground up as a Batman game was the excellent Genesis version, which I personally like a little bit more than the NES game. But a lot of people like the 8-bit one the most, and that's perfectly fine. Oh,
it looks pretty
and
good.
although this one's not the focus of this video, the version of Batman for the Game Boy is also better than the PC Engine game. Batman shoots guns here, once again just like the Punisher. But hey, it's still action and less something like Pac-Man. One thing's for sure though, both of the Batman games based on the 1989 movie for the Nintendo systems are much better than the Sunsoft Batman game for the far more powerful PC Engine.
But do you get to clean up graffiti? Why would anyone play this?
This is Virtua Racing on the Saturn, courtesy of Time Warner Interactive.
Never played it.
This is a
Don't know anything
3D
about it.
racing game based on F1 or maybe Indy, but yeah, probably F1.
Looks pretty fun.
The main gimmick of this game back at the time of its release was the ability to switch between any one of 4 viewpoints on the fly using the amazing 3D technology. Here, you get the 3 tracks from the arcade to race on. They're represented okay here, but sadly it seems to underperform given the Saturn hardware. I'd expect the Saturn to be able to manage a much faster frame rate than this, but you know how stingy Sega was with developers who weren't Sega at the time. Sega also gave Time Warner a Virtua Racing arcade cabinet, and they had to eyeball it when converting it to the Saturn, so that probably didn't help either. No source code for these guys. The control is fine, but the game feels like it slows down a lot. I can feel it struggling sometimes. The physics also feel a bit different from pretty much any other version of this game. It does have some extra stuff, like more tracks and cars, but to race these, you need to play the championship mode where you start out on go-karts. Still, the extra content is definitely welcome. There are some bugs in this one as well, like how it often forgets to play music during the replays. Yes, I'm using a real Saturn spinning the actual retail Virtua Racing disc here. Or how about when the game forgets to shut off the engine noise? Oh, that sounds good.
They had to pour all their development into Sonic
Overall, they
Extreme.
tried, and this is a good game on its own, but I feel that there's a better one that came before it.
Like, somebody really needs to, like, make that game and finish it. That would be amazing. They did that with Shantae. It was a game that they finally, like, had nearly done.
If you want a more faithful version of the game, play Virtua Racing Deluxe on the 32X.
Ooh.
This was a launch game for the add-on, which makes it even more impressive.
I am a 32X defender.
Except here, it's...
kind of. I love Knuckles Chaotix. I really, like, there are 2 or 3 things that they could have done to make that game fucking amazing. And if I were to, like, ever make a fan game, I would try and remake Knuckles Chaotix. Take out Heavy and Bomb and, you know, redo some of the levels maybe, or just add more shit into the levels. But I think the ring mechanic is really cool. There's, like, a lot you could do with that. Man, they were so close to. Music's fucking fantastic. Graphics are great. We got the fucking Team Chaotix team. Damn. What could have been?
Much faster, and the controls are always very responsive. Only a couple of seconds until the race starts, and we've got the wrong tires on! Quick, guys, change them!
Nice.
As a game, you'll do just as poorly, but I always just play to have fun. I rarely ever win. You have 2 new cars and 2 new courses exclusive to this version, and you can select them right from the get-go. I honestly think that the colors look a lot better in this version compared to the Saturn game. The draw distance here is a little worse than the Saturn, but really not by much.
It runs a lot better.
Same goes with the frame rate. Here, the replay has awesome music that was made just for this version of the game.
It's like more stable or something.
What's more is that the music here is in stereo. The Saturn version has CD quality music, but the entire game is in mono. The music on the disc
The
itself
Saturn
is in stereo,
is like
they
the
just speed
one
up
console I
programming the
never
game.
had. And I've only ever played it like maybe once or twice in my life. Ooh,
And there's no way to adjust this in the options screen. There are actually a few different
not
Saturn
nice.
games that have the same issue. I'm guessing it had something to do with the software development kits that they were provided. There's
Didn't
also a
they-
PlayStation 2
They
version
made
of
the
Virtua
discs
Racing.
like
I used to like this
weird,
one
like
a lot more
warped
than
or
I do.
something, and
A
it
lot of
made
people pointed out how your
emulation
car spins
really
on its center
difficult.
axis, and now it's just like something I can't overlook anymore. Don't get me wrong, it's still a fun game, but I like the 32X game more. In fact, I'd say that the 32X was the best way to play Virtua Racing outside of the arcade until it came out for the Switch in 2019. I wish it had the extra cars and tracks from the 32X game, but at least they took the cool replay theme from it.
I'm a big fan of those like background skyboxes.
You might be
Daggerfall
wondering
has
where
that,
Virtua Racing on the
and
Genesis
it makes
fits
all
in
the
here.
difference.
Well, the feel of the game is certainly more faithful, but I could
Like,
never
it is
get over
wild.
the ugly dithered graphics in this one. Even when I gamed in composite video back in the 90s, the dithering in this particular title always bothered me. I never found that composite video blends dithering like people on the internet claim it does. But hey, at least this one's in stereo.
Nice.
Anyway, if you want to play Virtua Racing on a home console that's not the Nintendo Switch, I'd personally have to recommend the 32X game here.
Good, hell yeah, man. That's a win for 32X. That doesn't come often. It's pretty much shat on universally. There's some good shit on there, though. I think, like, the Doom version was pretty good on there, I think.
Okay, this next one might be a bit controversial because it's absolutely a subjective take. Well, actually, now that I think about it, everything on this show is subjective. Anyway, take a look. This is Lunar, Silver Star Story Complete for the PlayStation, published by Working Design.
Is he gonna
This
say that
is an
the
excellent 2D
Sega CD
JRPG with a
version
nice
is better?
story.
Really?
Some people call these games Lunar, and it's fine if you say it that way.
Lunar.
It's also fine if you say it like a normal person. The
Yeah.
characters themselves tend to pronounce it as Lunar, though, so that's probably more correct in this case. In this game, you play as Alex, who builds a party on his quest to become a Dragon Master. Shenanigans ensue, and eventually you
Man,
have to save the world,
Working
and that
Designs
sweet,
was
sweet
so
Dragon Masterness
fucking
is
good.
yours for the taking. The graphics
God,
and
they put
gameplay
so
are both
much love into their
excellent.
products.
This is the kind of 2D greatness that I loved seeing in the 32-bit generation. The music is quite good as well.
That was really
This
like
is your
playing
first
an
foray
anime.
into the Lunar games. There's really nothing much to complain about, and you'll have a great time for sure.
I haven't played this game in probably 20 years. It was so good though. Rare, expensive. I had both Lunar 1 and 2.
But Lunar the Silver Star was originally released on the Sega CD, and I
Yep.
feel that this version is better in a few ways.
Really?
Now, this might just be that I played it here first.
Probably.
I've gone back and forth on which version I like more, but having thought about it a lot, the Sega CD game comes out on top more often than not. They made some story changes for the remake that felt a bit odd. An example here is Luna leaving your sorry ass behind when you get on a boat in Saith.
Goodbye, my love.
Whereas in the PlayStation game, she goes with you.
I hope I did the right thing.
It kind of changes the dynamic a
Huh.
bit. But if you've never played the Sega CD version, you'd never know, so it's not
Yeah.
going to bother you one bit. The gameplay
Just
here
like
is just
Nash.
much better on the Sega CD. The battles are random here as opposed to the complete version, but that doesn't mean it's worse. I find the battles in the Sega CD game to be much faster and less annoying. Here,
Really?
there's no loading. You get in and out of a battle with much less fuss. In the remake, the battles have to load. When a battle triggers in the PlayStation game, it kind of feels like you see your boss approaching down the hall bringing you a lot more extremely boring work to do. Let's just get this over with. Not
Yes,
only
I can
that,
see
but the
that.
AI in the battle system is a lot worse in the remake, using up all of your magic on basic enemies for no reason. However, there are some tactics that you can use so you don't have to set each command for every party member every single time. It also takes longer to level up in the remake due to the slower battles and fewer experience points given. The whole game seems faster on the Sega CD, like it respects my time more as a human being.
That's interesting. I've
Maybe
actually
the
never
worst
played
sin
the
about the
Sega CD
remake, in my
version.
opinion, is that they completely recomposed the music. The Sega CD tunes are classic. Now, the new music is still great stuff, but it's not as good as the original, and it feels like it belongs in a different game.
No, that shit's good. That shit's better. I'll defend
I
the
would have loved to
PS1
hear
game.
new arranged interpretations of the classic tunes in the remake. It's hard to overlook the amazing graphics and a few of the other quality of life improvements in the PlayStation remake, but if you've never played a Lunar game before and you want the best experience, I've got to recommend that you start with the Sega CD game. But I want to know, if you played the PlayStation version first, do you like it more than the Sega CD game? Maybe it all just depends
From what
on
I've
which one you
seen,
experience first.
But I don't know. I haven't played it. Maybe I should at some point. Or maybe I have and I forgot. I don't remember. But like, I'm pretty sure there were cutscenes added in the PlayStation 1 that weren't in CD. Like, I'm fairly sure of that.
Here's Batman Returns on the Genesis, released in 1992 and developed by Malibu Interactive. This was an important licensed title for Sega of America.
Another Batman
It's an
game.
action platformer where you play as Batman, but you'd never know it. That's because Batman is woefully underpowered in this game. His hitbox is giant and his reach is short. He takes damage very easily and his life depletes quickly. He does have a utility belt to throw projectiles, but these are limited in
kinda neat.
supply. If you run out, you have absolutely
that.
no choice but to take hits from some enemies.
I like that when the utility belt popped up and you got to select it. That's really
The
cool.
gameplay feels very stiff and disjointed,
like,
which is not
immersive.
helped at all by the poor level design. You have to hold up on the D-pad for what feels like a second before you can use your grappling hook. The graphics have some good ideas in the visual design, but come off as dark and extremely grainy. It's not pleasant looking at all. The music actually has some potential, but unfortunately the sound quality of the GEM sound driver brings it way down. Hell, a lot of the music doesn't even play correctly on a Model 1 Genesis because they didn't bother to test the game with anything but a Model 2 console.
I forget which one is which. I had like the big fat one. Had like a headphone port on it.
Sunsoft's Batman for the Genesis, which was released a few years earlier, is a much better game at half the memory. Batman is far more nimble, especially with his grappling hook and his jumping. Of course, the music blows the stuff in Batman Returns away. I'm sure the developers of Batman Returns here saw it, but somehow deluded themselves into thinking that the game they were working on was somehow better. I wonder how they felt when they saw Konami's excellent
Yeah, I
Batman
had the
Returns
first
on the
one.
Super NES. This game absolutely thrashes the Genesis game to an honestly embarrassing degree. Somehow, Sega of America probably still thought that their game was better because they'd go on to make more games of the same low quality. Sega spent money to have the developers go to the movie set to watch some of the scenes be filmed. I think the money could have been better spent on gameplay design, but it probably wouldn't have made any difference, honestly. Overall, the game is pretty dreadful to play.
It does not look fun. The sprite work is pretty good though. Well, the Batman one is.
But did you know that Sega actually did make a fantastic Batman Returns game on the Game Gear? This is
What?
another side-scrolling action platformer, but in this one you might actually find yourself having fun.
I loved my
As
Game
Batman,
Gear,
you
like,
attack with an unlimited supply
47
of
seconds
batarangs
I
that
got to
behave
play
with
it
a
before the
boomerang
batteries ran out.
behavior. But you have 3 different strengths of these that you can adjust in the pause menu. You can have them travel further, but of course then your attack is a bit weaker. And of course, the strong attack
That's
is
kinda
super
cool.
short. In addition to this, you can call in the Batmobile for a special attack as long as you have some stock remaining. In each stage, you start by choosing your route. Which do you choose, your route or your route? Both will be the same stage, but with different layouts. Route 2 is usually a bit tougher than Route 1. You can use your grappling hook to ascend to certain platforms. You can also use it to maneuver yourself over bottomless chasms.
That's cool.
Naturally, you have a life bar. There are bat icons scattered throughout each stage, which will offer some life refills or allow you to use the Batmobile's special attack in additional time. Naturally, each stage ends in a boss fight, and you'll need to learn their patterns. The graphics are pretty good for the handheld, and the stage design really makes the game fun. The sound was done by Motohiro Kawashima, who works with Yuzo Koshiro a lot, and that means the music here is actually quite good.
See, that's an acceptable amount of yellow. That sprite looks really good.
Batman Returns also showed up in Europe, Australia, and Brazil on the Master System. It's based on the same game, but this version is sadly worse and features reduced colors. They took away the life bar, and now you die in one hit. You don't have a menu to select different ranges of attack. And somehow they managed to make the control feel worse, especially the grappling hook. So stick with the Game Gear version here if you want to have a fun side-scrolling Batman Returns game on a Sega platform.
A rare win for the Game Gear. Actually, Game Gear had a lot of cool shit on it. I'll take that back.
I was rather disappointed with this next game when it came out because I had hoped it would be better than the 8-bit versions which preceded it. But no. Here's Double Dragon on the mighty 16-bit Sega Genesis.
Ooh.
This port from Accolade, or Ballistic, attempts to recreate the arcade faithfully. Honestly, the graphics are a little better and more colorful than the arcade. It looks great. Also, the arcade game was plagued with slowdown, and this version doesn't have any of that. In fact, it seems to run at warp
It was
speed.
like the big thing.
It also
with
lets
Sega.
up to 2 players
They
play
got, like,
simultaneously. Unfortunately, that's about
arcade
where the
quality,
good things I can say
if not a
about
little
this
bit
one
better.
ends. To be
Sometimes
fair,
worse.
this was made as an unlicensed title without an official
That's a
software
huge selling
development kit.
point, though. I
They
remember.
tried to incorporate the same control scheme with the jump, kick, and punch buttons, with jump being in the middle
In the
unless you
blast
reassign.
processing.
This works okay, but man, the controls sometimes work and sometimes don't. That's mainly because the enemy attacks you in very quick succession. Get 2 or 3 on screen and you might as well not even bother to press any buttons because their attacks take priority. Of course, you can move around the screen,
Shit.
but the enemies follow you very closely. What the hell, am I magnetic? Also, when I advance, why do I need to be so damn close to the edge of the screen to make it scroll? You can walk right into a waiting enemy that you didn't see.
Yeah,
And you really
that's
need to be
kinda
careful
bad.
around gaps like this. Oops. Also, in the final stage, aren't bricks supposed to be jutting out of this part to push me off? I'm guessing I just didn't get close enough to trigger them. Despite all this, you can just power your way through this game's 4 levels and beat it in no time.
4?
Lastly, the music sounds awful. Did they just take a MIDI file and assign random instruments and not listen to it to see how it sounds?
Oh,
Wow,
that
it's
bad.
super abrasive. Just
I
like
mean,
my
it is,
personality.
but-
Now, there are fan patches that fix everything here from the music to the speed, but keep in mind we're sticking with retail releases in this episode. We all know that the Genesis can do much better than this. Double Dragon on the Sega Master System
I
is a
bought
better
Double
game in most
Dragon
respects.
on the
It
Game
retains
Boy.
the 2-player action and has much
And I had never played or even heard of a Double Dragon game because I was very young back then. And I thought it was gonna be that like you're playing a dragon and you're like flying around and you have to do dragon business or something. I don't know. And then whenever I bought it and put it in, I'm like, these guys like running around on the street punching people. I'm like, what the fuck? What is this? Where are the dragons? Where's like the high fantasy magic stuff? It was so disappointing. It actually might be the first like seed that was planted that makes me like really not enjoy like modern era games as far as like being set in like a modern era. That's probably where it stems back to now that I think about it.
better sounding music regardless of if you listen to it in the default PSG or the FM soundtrack. Yeah, everything is a lot smaller, but it's very colorful and it still looks fantastic for the system. And it's just a lot more fun, even with only 2 buttons. You have to press both buttons at the same time to jump, but it doesn't take long to get used to. Most of the moves are still here, but it can be tough to pull off with only 2 buttons, much less make contact with an enemy. The game loses all the bits where you can climb on a ladder. In fact, the game loses all of the verticality of the original, except right here. Whoa! Oh, and right here. Whoa, man, how did they do that? That is a trip! It is a flickery mess, which is this one's biggest downfall, but overall, it's much more enjoyable than the Genesis game.
I think I had Double Dragon 2. Let me see.
And hell, even the NES version of Double Dragon is better than the Genesis version. This one right here was a mega hot game when it was released.
Yeah,
of
that's
course,
what
when
I
it came
had.
out, it was hard to get.
That's the one I had right here. Nobody cares, but fuck it. That one, Double Dragon. Look how fucking cool that looks. That looks amazing. Now, dude, look at that shit. They got like ninjas, fucking big ass Shinron looking dragon here. This like guy up there in the corner doing stuff. It's like, okay, Shinobi ninja dragon magic. You get to summon a dragon, or you get to fly on a dragon and kill these. Nope. Nope. None of it. None of it.
Thanks to one of Nintendo's many chip shortages, which only made it more desirable. Nintendo knows that scarcity creates demand and headlines.
Yep.
Anyway, this version is single player, which sucks, but it still plays a great game of Double Dragon. Some might even argue that it's better than the Sega Master System version, and people who argue that do have a point. For example, this game adds a lot of extra areas and level extensions that are unique to this version. That's pretty cool, though some of these areas don't work well with the control because you can't move up or down, so you're stuck on a single plane. I still like these areas though. One thing you need to look out for are the looping levels. This level will repeat forever unless you know to go into one of the holes here. Same with this level. Don't fight these Abobos, instead climb up, because if you fight and defeat them, the game won't let you climb up afterwards for some reason. One thing that you may or may not like is that you have to earn your moves by defeating enemies. Once you murder enough enemies, you'll get a heart, and a new move becomes available that you can do. The graphics are muted, but still great for the time. The flicker is limited because only you and 2 enemies are allowed on screen at any given time. Even with that, this game is quite challenging. The enemy is very adept at avoiding your attacks. Unfortunately, this one sets you back a tiny bit if you die, and there are no continues, so good luck. Still, this game is great overall. And once again, I want to mention the Game Boy version real quick. This one takes the NES design and rethinks it. You no longer have to earn your moves. However, there are exclusive areas that will remind you of the NES game, and you'll likely have more fun playing this than the Genesis game.
Like,
so the
it
Master
was
System,
fun,
Game Boy, and the NES version
but
here are all better than the 16-bit
talking about
Genesis version.
disappointment and letdown. Sad times. When is it not, though?
Lastly, we have Super Monkey Ball for the GameCube. This is one of my favorite games of all time, and definitely my favorite game for the console. Super Monkey Ball 2 is also fantastic, but not as good as Part 1. But I need to mention it in this section anyway. The object of the game is to guide your monkey to the goal.
Interesting take. I've heard a lot of
I
people
don't mean to toot my own horn, maybe I do, but I'm really good at this game. I can't tell you how many hours I've put into this one over the years, and I never get sick of it. But then Super Monkey Ball Deluxe came out for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox. This was released in 2005. The PlayStation 2 is weaker than the GameCube, so that version doesn't count for this episode. However, the Xbox is quite a bit more powerful. The disc has both Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2. Is this package better than the GameCube originals? Well, yes and no. The first game does now feature optional widescreen as well as 480p graphics, whereas the original didn't, and that's pretty cool. And there are also a lot of new stages that are unique to this version, at least they were for the time. Mostly, this is a fantastic disc with tons of content, at least on the Xbox, so you don't want to play the PS2 version. However, there are some issues with the control. This boils down to two issues. One is that there's very little or no dead zone on the Xbox controller. The other is that the Xbox analog stick has much less swing than the GameCube analog stick. That makes the control here extremely sensitive.
I'm not a big
tough
monkey
to
ball
pass
player.
stages like this because the game's going to react to every little nuance
look
and
fun.
micro vibration. If blood just happens to pump through your thumb at the wrong time, well, off you go. It is still doable, but you really do need to make sure you're in a very zen-like state so that you don't accidentally overcorrect. Sega seems to have acknowledged this, at least in a few of the brand new stages. Like here, you kind of get locked on when trying to get on these thin tracks. I didn't do that, the game did that on its own. This is still an excellent title, but the GameCube controller just can't be beat.
True. One of the best controllers ever.
Then, in 2021, Sega released Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania on all of the modern platforms of the time. And I have all of the console versions, that's what kind of Monkey Ball fan I am. I made an entire video about this one back then, but not a whole lot of you saw it, so I figured I'd remind everyone about this one. It upgrades both Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2 to 4K visuals and 16:9, which is of course to be expected. It really does look good, for Super Monkey Ball. It sounds pretty nice too, and if you spend extra money, you can get the original music if you prefer. Anyway, like Super Monkey Ball Deluxe, this one has control issues, but the controls here are considerably worse. A lot of this is due to how the camera now tracks your monkey. It's just not the same, and as a result, you can over or under correct your tilt. You do have control of the camera with the second analog stick, which is cool, but it's not always a blessing. If you move the camera while you're tilting the board, you're probably going to have a bad time.
I wonder...
But as to be expected, it goes beyond the camera and into the controls themselves. Getting past this stage is nearly impossible for me on any version of this game. The controls are just way too sensitive. I always end up overcorrecting, and that results in my doom. Keep in mind that I'm really good at this game. I'm not just some random loser. Getting past it on the GameCube is easy peasy. Any underdeveloped fetus could do it. I really wish they would have tried their best to replicate the GameCube controls by at least...
I wonder if he's like so used to the game and that's why it's bad. Because that very well could be the case, which is not like... I don't know. I mean, it's not like a good or bad thing, but it would be interesting to
least having a small dead zone. Even using a real GameCube controller on the Switch version isn't helpful, so there must be some underlying issues with the way the controls were programmed here. Not only that, but they changed the actual physics. In the original game, you could hold forward and bounce right into the goal in this stage.
Yeah.
Nice. You could even do this in Super
I've watched
Monkey
a
Ball
lot
Deluxe.
of people
At least they kept the
speedrun this,
physics and the
it's
tricks that you could do the same in
pretty damn
that.
cool.
In Banana Mania here, your bounces have a different amount of effect applied, and you'll fall through the stage every time if you try that tactic. You might say that they did this to challenge expert players, but I don't believe that for a second. I mean, they made lots of other changes to make the game easier, like eliminating gaps in some stages. Like in this Anthropod stage, gaps aplenty in the original and also in Super Monkey Ball Deluxe. In Banana Mania here, you can see that they decreased the gap amount so that it requires no skill at all. So yeah, that argument just doesn't hold up. And they even ruined the mini-games. Monkey Target is the only one I care about, and it's damn hard to even make it anywhere to land. Like I said, they changed the physics. I don't know why, I wish they didn't. There was no reason for them to. No version of this game has a perfectly locked 60 frames per second at all times, but the PlayStation 5 version is by far the worst, with plenty of stuttering. But honestly, this game should be running at or close to 120 frames per second. It's not like there's a ton of geometry here. The PlayStation 4 version actually runs better than the PS5 version. Anyway, don't get me wrong, Banana Mania here is a good game, especially if you haven't played the originals. But if you want a real challenge with extremely precise and fair controls, you've got to play the original on the GameCube.
Ready?
Just gotta show it off. I would do the same thing. That's funny.
And there you go, some examples of games that were better on lesser powered hardware. This one was really fun to make. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And
pretty good.
I do have a few other examples of games that meet this criteria that I wasn't able to fit in this episode, so maybe we'll come back to it. But how about you? Do you have any examples of games that are better on weaker powered consoles? If so, let me know. And in the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack.
Let me think. Are there better games on weaker powered consoles that are like the same game? That's an interesting question.
Hi, how you doing? And welcome to the Joe Rutherford Show. Today's topic, people who look like me. Now let's bring out our first guest, Mr. Dwight Zimble.
What the fuck?
How you doing today, Joe?
Damn,
Just
he had
fine,
some
Dwight.
hair back
Now,
there.
could you please tell us why you're here? Well, Joe, as you can see, I have a severe problem. You see, I look like you. And why do you consider this a problem? Who wants to
What
look
is
like
this?
you? Did you just come here to insult me? Is that what you're trying to do? Is to insult me? Seems to be very easy to do. If that's your attitude, you can just get off my show now. I'm not going
He
anywhere.
looks like
Wow. I'm
the
just gonna have to kill you.
quintessential nerd, and I love
This has been the Joe Rutherford Show. Thank you, and good night.
it. What the fuck?
Historically speaking, the state of Florida has been
Ooh.
famous for its sunny beaches, expansive theme parks, and diverse wildlife. But over the last decade or so,
You know, flamingos are not pink, like naturally. They breed in like incredibly briny water, and the only thing that can, like salty water, and the only thing that can live in there is just like bacteria that they eat. I think it's bacteria or something, some like very specific animal or bacteria, whatever, life that gives them that pink color. I didn't know that until like pretty recently.
there's been one export that's really taken center stage, at least in terms of online intrigue. It's the phenomenon of Florida Man. Yes, Florida has in many ways become a meme thanks to its extraordinary penchant for regularly churning out some of the most bizarre criminals in the world. From Florida men assaulting people with alligators, to a sloshed Sunshine Stater getting a DUI while operating a motorized Walmart scooter. You can rest assured that if you're browsing the web and you see an online article that has the headline Florida Man, it's going to detail some of the most creatively batshit insane crimes imaginable. And with that, put your swim trunks on and come with me on this wavy web surf special report. These are the internet's most notorious Florida men.
Hell yeah.
Today's video is sponsored by Opera. In the world of internet browsers, I found that Opera is top of the line when it comes to built-in quality of life features. I love Opera's new Lucid Mode feature. Lucid Mode fixes
is that?
blurry online videos with a single click. I've had a lot of fun with Lucid, as a lot of my video research comes from me digging
Damn.
through old 480p videos and old school YouTube. It's interesting to see Lucid work its magic on these old clips. Really
I'ma
sharpens
be
those
honest.
images up. And of course, Opera has you covered with the
That one I
essentials.
didn't
It's
really
got a
know.
built-in VPN, ad blocker, and private browsing mode. I'm also a really big fan of Opera's tab islands, which help clean up your workspace. This feature allows you to consolidate related tabs at the top of your browsers to islands. Here you can see I've got some YouTube videos I'm researching and some Google Docs that I'm working on. Now that's a lot of tabs. It's cluttery. Let's island them out and boom. The workspace is much cleaner,
Nice.
easier to navigate. We know where everything's at. And And lastly, this browser comes equipped with Aria, Opera's native AI tool. With live access to the web, Aria greatly expands your capabilities with AI. It's easily accessible in the sidebar and gives you clear answers instantly. Aria gives you real-time information to any questions asked and generates content based on your ideas in just a few clicks. What more can I say? Opera has it all and even a little more. I want to give a big thanks to them for sponsoring today's video, and if you're interested in downloading Opera, a link is in the description to do so. Florida man violates a plush doll. Florida men are no stranger to committing sex crimes. However, this particular Florida man was jailed for a deviancy that few even in the Sunshine State can lay claim to. He violated an Olaf the Snowman doll in public. On October 22nd of 2019 in Pinellas Park, Florida, a man named Cody Christopher Meter visited his local Target retail location. But what you'll soon find though is that this was no ordinary visit to pick up new clothes or groceries. Rather, the man's purpose for being at this Target was far more sinister, with Cody apparently visiting the location to fulfill a depraved sexual fantasy. Upon arriving at the Target store, the 20-year-old man went to a merchandise display which housed various toys from Disney's Frozen movie. He then picked up a large Olaf plushie from the shelf, removed his genitals from his pants, and began humping the stuffed snowman on the Target store floor. According to reports from officials, Cody would ejaculate on the toy and return the desecrated doll to the display shelf. And this wasn't the end of the degeneracy, as Cody was looking for round two. After defiling the Olaf doll, Cody reportedly walked over to another toy aisle and grabbed a large unicorn plushie. He would then proceed to violate the toy in a sexual manner as well. If not stopped, this rampaging dry humper likely would have nutted on every toy in the Target store. Thankfully though, due to surveillance footage, security detected what Cody was perpetrating, and police were notified promptly. Cody had been caught red-handed, and when police arrived and questioned him, he confessed to doing, quote, stupid stuff and said that he, quote, nutted on Olaf. As a result of his serial dry humping spree at Target, Cody was charged with criminal mischief. As for the toys that he violated, they were removed from shelves and destroyed. Following Cody's detainment, his father revealed to police that he, quote, has a history of this type of behavior, unquote. The exact details of what the father meant by this statement weren't elaborated on, but needless to say, it's possible that this wasn't Cody's first foray into such disgusting activity. Whatever the case, Cody's time in custody was short-lived, as he was released from jail on the same day of his arrest on a $150 bail. About a year after the crime, in March of 2021, a judge ordered a psychological evaluation for Cody. The judge appointed him a psychologist before a hearing on April of 2021 that would determine his ability to stand trial. He was eventually determined fit to stand trial, and in January of 2022, the Florida freak was sentenced to serve 6 months of probation. This sentence came after he pled no contest to criminal mischief and indecent exposure charges. He was also ordered to pay $725 in court fines and costs. Florida restaurant thief avoids jail because he's obese. This next Florida man story is admittedly one of the more humorous on the list, and that's saying a lot because there's some pretty funny shit in this compilation. It's the tale of a Florida criminal that was so morbidly obese that he literally could not be placed in prison. In 2007, a 600-pound man named George Olikar of Sanford, Florida, was very fittingly arrested for scamming various restaurants and stores. George was said to have been peddling this scam as far back as 2005. George was notorious for ordering a bunch of food, eating like half of it or more than half of it, and then complaining about its quality in an attempt to get refunds. This gluttonous con man once reportedly downed 6 milkshakes from a restaurant, and then when it was time to pay, he claimed his last shake had a hair in it and refused to pay the tab. 6 milkshakes, bro. Jesus. This portly gentleman's fast food scamming antics would eventually catch up to him, though, as Big George would finally be arrested after he reportedly consumed close to $50 of 7-Eleven beef jerky and attempted to trick the staff members of the gas station into giving him a refund under the premise of one of the bags having moldy beef in it. His deceptive trick failed, and police were actually notified over this event. After being tipped off about this scammer, cops later made their way to George's home and arrested him
I'm
for
pretty
his
sure
alleged
beef
scam
jerky
attempt. The police
couldn't
report
mold.
from the incident indicates that when cops were arresting George,
It's too
the man,
salty.
quote, raised the
Maybe
pitch
it
of his
can, I don't
voice to sound like a woman. So I guess George thought if he faked a high-pitched voice, the cops would like go easy on him, thinking he was a girl or something. Regardless, this pitch shifting did little to deter law enforcement, as George would be arrested and booked. While in police custody on the way to the police station, the 38-year-old man reportedly muttered in front of police officers, quote, "The beef jerky got me." As a result of his activities, George was charged with 5 counts of felony petty theft. After
Damn that
being
beef
charged,
jerky.
it was thought that George would then be sent to jail and begin trial. But something worse happened to the man. In the months after he was charged, George came down with a serious unspecified illness and became bedridden as a result of this. George's illness was so severe that rather than being jailed, he was confined by his sickness to a hospital bed and at one point even had to be put on a life-saving respirator treatment. Once
Goddamn.
stabilized, he was sent to a nursing facility to recover. In light of this sickness, one thing was becoming clear to prosecutors who were trying to punish George. Even if they got George in jail, due to his obesity and health problems, he likely wouldn't survive in prison. George's immense weight put him at serious risk for morbidity. And not only that, if they were to take George to trial, the state would have to pay for the bedridden man's transportation to court sessions and potential medical bills associated with health problems
too
related
fat
to
to go to
travel. So
jail.
to avoid this hassle, George was given a no-contest plea deal, which an attorney accepted on his behalf. With this plea deal, George would have to pay $1,365 in court costs and an unstated amount of restitution. George would also plead no contest to 5 counts of misdemeanor petty theft. And due to this bizarre situation surrounding his weight and health, George, as far as I'm aware, never spent a day in prison. Next
Of course
up,
he wouldn't.
Florida man attacks a minion. Over the
think I've
years,
heard this one,
Illumination's
too.
minion characters have
Maybe.
become, at least by some people, some of the most loathed mascots in animation, with many folks expressing their
Probably.
contempt for the obnoxious creatures and the movies that they're in online. Well, one Florida man hated minions so much that he would go on to violently assault one. On the evening of July 8th of 2018 in Daytona Beach, Florida,
people are
26-year-old
fucking
Ryan
weird.
Mehart from Omaha, Florida, randomly attacked a man wearing a minion costume in front of a gift shop. The victim wearing the minion suit was 41-year-old Jamie Rowan, a partially blind and mentally disabled man who was
I have
completely
heard
defenseless
this.
throughout the attack. Ryan body
I have
slammed and
heard this
kicked
one.
Rowan in the groin repeatedly as 2 of his friends watched and cheered
It's
him on
pretty
during the
fucked
attack.
up.
One of
Like,
these friends was
what is
filming
wrong
the
with
assault
people?
for Ryan's social media. The altercation was also caught on the store's security cameras. While Ryan was beating Rowan, the disabled man pleaded with him to stop, but the minion's pleas fell on deaf ears. Ryan continued to hit the minion
That's so
until he was
fucked up.
eventually subdued by the shop owner and a good Samaritan who was witnessing the violent ordeal. Finally, police would arrive on the scene and put an end to the altercation for good. After first responders arrived, Rowan refused medical treatment as he apparently only had some bruises, but he allowed the police to take
Sure.
pictures of his injuries. In police body cam footage from the incident, Ryan can be seen telling the officer that he's a social media influencer and that Rowan provided him with explicit permission to film the occurrence for his Instagram.
It's just a prank, bro. Just a prank.
So Ryan was essentially claiming that this was a
He actually
staged
said
prank.
it.
Ryan said, quote, "I'm an Instagram star. I'm literally doing a prank. I'm an Instagram
prank,
stuntman." He also
bro.
said, quote, "I was just kidding, bro. Me and the minion talked it out." Turns out, though, Mr. Rowan was not in on the prank, and Ryan, he wasn't really even an Instagram star, apparently only having 1,875 followers at the time on his account. And according to Daily Mail,
More of a
Ryan had a
star than I
YouTube
am.
channel that had a whopping 48 subscribers. According to reports, Rowan told police that he
probably has
didn't want
more
to
than I
wrestle
do
with
now.
Ryan after the assailant asked him to participate in a fight. And I guess Ryan just went through with it anyways. Ryan was
not?
initially arrested and charged with misdemeanor battery and criminal mischief, but was promptly released. After posting bail, Ryan reportedly posted an apology video to social media, although this video has since been deleted.
Yeah, I'm sorry I got caught.
I did it for the love of you. How was I supposed to know? I thought I had the minion's consent.
Several months later, Ryan would plead no contest to the charges issued against him. And as a result of this, he was sentenced to 10 days in jail and a year of probation. The terms of his sentencing also required him to avoid drinking alcohol and to enroll in a moral recognition therapy course. And lastly, the judge ordered him to pay $280 in damages to Roam, and he was also made to pay for the damages caused to the minion costume. Next up, Florida man gropes a woman during a palm reading session. How low can a Florida man stoop to satisfy their sexual urges?
Have I watched this before?
This Florida degenerate knows no bounds, apparently. On May 19th of 2014, 52-year-old Zulfikar Jaffer of Sanford, Florida, was arrested and charged with 2 counts of battery for allegedly groping a woman's breast while pretending to be a palm reader at a Walmart. Police received a call from a woman who claimed that Jaffer read her palm at the store and then followed her into the parking lot and offered her another special reading. She reportedly accepted his offer and got into the backseat of his car for this special procedure. According to the report, Jaffer then told her that he needed to feel her heart and proceeded to put his hand under her blouse. And it was at this moment that the man reportedly grabbed her breast. And apparently this wasn't the man's first rodeo, as there was a report from this Walmart stating that he had done something similar days prior. The police report from this incident also details other disturbing activities allegedly perpetrated by Jaffer. One report states that after a mom strapped her daughter into her car, Jaffer came up to her in the parking lot and said that he wanted to read her palm. The man told her that he could tell that she was pregnant and wanted to feel the baby's heartbeat. Once this woman denied the man's request, he reportedly groped her breast and fled the scene. Because of these alleged breast groping incidents, Jaffer was eventually arrested. And after his arrest, even more women came out making allegations against him for these parking lot breast grabbings. Following his arrest, 2 additional victims came out against Jaffer and stated that he also assaulted them as well. And I'm unable to determine the outcome of his charges. Whatever the case, it goes without saying, when you're in Florida, be weary of a Walmart palm reader. Florida man illegally mounts a manatee. Along with its sunny and sandy beaches, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Florida is also famous for its aquatic wildlife. Much of this precious wildlife is protected by the state government, and messing with said protected animals comes with serious consequences. Consequences that our next Florida man would have to face after he attempted to ride a wild manatee. On September 16th of 2016, 47-year-old James Roy Massengale jumped into a manatee-inhabited body of water in Alvarado, Florida. As Roy swam around the protected waterway, he would go on to touch 2 adult manatees and their babies. Witnesses who had seen Roy jump into the water yelled out to the man, informing him that what he was doing was illegal. In response, Roy continued to fondle the manatees and even allegedly yelled out, "I'm riding it." Fish and wildlife conservation officers were notified about the manatee mounting and later found Roy, quote, reaching for, touching, and lying on top of manatees in the creek. The officers informed him that what he was doing was against the law, and it was at this point that Roy became verbally aggressive with them, repeatedly saying, "Take me to jail." Roy would continue to harass the manatees for a short time until wildlife officers pulled him out of the creek and arrested him. For his manatee misconduct, Roy was charged with annoying, molesting, harassing, or disturbing a manatee. Next up, Florida man caught violating a Siberian husky while wearing a dog costume. While most furries out there are simply fun seekers with a love for animal alter egos,
I have never met a furry that does not, how do I say this? I've met a lot of furries at conventions, and I've never met one that sexuality of being a furry does not come into play. it is never that, oh, it's just fur animals. Like, I'm sure there are those out there, but I have never met one. I know a lot of furries on the internet. None of them are just because it's looks cool. Like, it is always involving or related to sexual things, which is fine. I don't give a fuck. But to say that most of them are just, you know, they want to dress up as animals, that has just not been my experience. And maybe I don't. Maybe my experience isn't like everyone else's, but that's just not the case with me in my interactions with furries. They're always at some point bring up something sexual in relation to that fandom.
There have been a small handful of bizarre crimes committed by members of the furry fandom. And when it comes to furry criminals, the ones from Florida are built different. Which brings us to the disturbing case of Mr. Nichols. On February 11th of 2019, 21-year-old Christian Stewart Oscar Nichols of Oldsmar, Florida, was arrested after allegedly filming himself sexually violating his Siberian husky while wearing a dog costume. It all started on January 25th when an individual from out of state reached out to the Pinellas County, Florida Animal Services Department to inform them of a repulsive video and image that they had discovered online. That video being the aforementioned bestiality content, and local authorities had been tipped off to it. After reviewing the photos and videos of concern, detectives claimed that Nichols could be seen in the
What the fuck is happening with this person's beard? Can you call it a beard? It literally looks like that episode where Cartman feeds Scott Tenorman's parents to himself in chili because Scott Tenorman, like, he got pubes from Scott Tenorman, like, glued it on his face or something. It's exact, and the guy actually kind of looks like Cartman.
Content wearing a black and white husky costume while performing sex acts to the animal. They also commented that the dog seemed to have been in significant distress during the video's recording, adding that the animal tried running away from Nichols at one point, which allegedly resulted in the furry freak hitting it with a sex toy and then continuing his monstrous assault. These investigators eventually connected this content to Mr. Nichols and worked on tracking him down so they could go in for an arrest. When confronted by police investigators, Mr. Nichols came clean. He reportedly admitted that he was the twisted mastermind behind the gut-wrenching material containing his dog named Ember. He was arrested and charged with one count of aggravated animal cruelty. The man was also charged with an additional 10 counts of possession of obscene materials after more unrelated zoophilic videos were allegedly found in his bedroom. Thankfully, the dogs that were in Mr. Nichols' possession, including Ember, were taken away from him, and one can only hope that they found new homes where they weren't abused. Florida man attempts to sell a downed electric pole. And what might be one of the most batshit hillbilly redneck Florida men stories in this compendium, it's the tale of Douglas Allen Hatley, a Florida scrap metal thief with some serious money-making ambition.
I think I've heard of this one, too.
On November 16th of 2020, 71-year-old Douglas Allen Hatley of Lakeland, Florida, noticed a downed utility pole on the side of the interstate. No stranger to selling scrap metal for money, the guy got an idea. He thought that he might be able to strap this thing up to his car and sell it for money. So this man goes on to tie this giant pole to the top of his 1997 Toyota Camry. Hadley felt as if he had just come up on a small fortune, but his plans would be thwarted after the scrapyard turned him down. Seeing this pole and feeling as if it was probably government property, the scrapyard was requesting special documentation for Mr. Hatley to sell this thing, and that was stuff that he didn't have. And feeling as if it was stolen, they reported him. I mean, could it not be any more obvious? It's strapped to a fucking 97 Camry. Hatley also got reported after a witness saw him strapping the pole to his car's roof and called the Tampa Bay Regional Communications Center. This witness then followed Hatley's car from a distance and provided details on his location. Shortly after, a highway patrolman pulled him over and confiscated the pole and car.
There was no criminal intent whatsoever.
totally
Well, when you take a
non-violent.
light pole off the interstate that don't belong to you, that's
Well,
wrong.
look, I had no idea it was wrong.
Does that belong to you?
No, but
Obviously
it's
you knew it
good
was
for
wrong because-
scrap.
In light of being busted for stealing this utility pole, Mr. Hatley was
good for
arrested
scrap.
and charged with grand theft. His bond was set at $2,000. Unsurprisingly, this wasn't the man's first rodeo with Florida law enforcement. At the time of the incident, Hadley had been arrested 48 times prior. These arrests starting as far
48?
back as 1971, with the man being arrested for crimes ranging from burglary to grand theft to
damn.
probation violation. Hell, 2 of these arrests were actually quite similar to the specific crime he was in trouble for now. Stealing government property. While it's not exactly known what kind of time Hatley got for stealing this utility pole, it goes without saying that this is probably one of the lower IQ Florida criminals on the list. Florida man attempts to steal a chainsaw by shoving it down his pants. Florida criminals are different from those in other states, especially when it comes to just the brazenness of their activity. It's like they have no limiter. It's almost as if the
True.
scorching temperatures and swamp-like humidity just give them superpowers or something. Yeah, for example, like Florida shoplifters, they don't steal bags of chips, they steal fucking chainsaws. Which brings us to the topic of our next story, the Treasure Coast lawn care incident. On October 28th of 2014,
incident.
28-year-old Anthony Ballard of Port St. Lucie went to the Treasure Coast lawn equipment store and asked the cashier if they could make change for $1. However, this was nothing more than a ploy to steal. While the employee was distracted, Ballard allegedly grabbed a $600 chainsaw nearby and shoved it down his shorts. He then covered it up with his shirt and left the premises. So he had the chainsaw stuffed down his pants, he covered it up a bit with his shirt, got change for the $1, and left thinking
Got
that
it, yeah.
nobody had saw him. However, this chainsaw bandit wasn't as sneaky as he thought he was, as some store workers had noticed a fleet-footed Floridian running off with the chainsaw on his
It's a good
shorts and they
alliteration.
followed him. While being pursued, Ballard realized the chainsaw was quite the running impediment, so he has the idea of yanking it out of his pants and throwing it into like a hidden area of the woods that he could return to later. He hoped to
Sure.
escape and return to the location in the future, and it didn't seem like when he was being followed that anyone saw him throw the chainsaw, so he certainly thought that like in the future I can come back and pick this thing up and everything will be fine. Ballard would manage to escape the initial chase by store employees and would indeed return to the location that he threw the chainsaw approximately 40 minutes later. But if you couldn't tell
moron.
already, Ballard isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. The store employees actually did see where he threw the chainsaw. And once they saw Ballard come back to look for it, they called the police. Cops would arrive and in short time, they arrested the chainsaw swindler, charging him with grand theft. He was also booked at the St. Lucie County Jail and his bond was set at $18,750. The chainsaw swindler was an idiot, but what about the Florida man who butt dialed the cops and revealed a murder plot? Now, we've all butt dialed someone before, you know, called somebody on accident. Hell, I'm sure some of you have been talking shit about someone you shouldn't be talked about, and you start getting suspicious thinking that your phone has accidentally called them. Well, how about the guy who accidentally called the police while discussing who he wanted killed? On May 5th of 2013, 24-year-old Scott Simon of Pompano Beach, Florida, and unwittingly recorded himself detailing his intentions to murder a man named Nicholas Walker. Initially, 911 dispatch and police thought the call to be nothing more than a joke or some sort of prank. That was until later in the day, 33-year-old Florida man Nicholas Walker was found dead in his vehicle, which had
Holy
crashed into a
shit.
guardrail on the interstate. Upon searching the crash site, it was discovered that Nicholas Walker had actually been shot. The man was dead and had been shot multiple times, in fact. Now, naturally, considering these circumstances, it became clear to authorities that this butt dial was no joke or prank and was actually some criminal out there who had inadvertently or unknowingly confessed to a murder plot.
God
This
damn.
investigation eventually led them to
How
the
do you,
man
like,
who made
why
the
do you
phone
have
call,
that in your
24-year-old
phone?
Scott Simon, as mentioned
Why is
earlier.
that so easy to
Furthermore, this
butt dial?
investigation revealed that Simon was a ringleader of sorts and had 2 accomplices that helped him with Walker's murder. These 2 accomplices were 27-year-old Ronald Desenor and 25-year-old Michael Dupree. And it turns out Walker was apparently killed as a feud that all began at Waffle House. Some of this feud was reportedly caught on surveillance video. After this Waffle House altercation, Simon's men conspired to kill Walker and concocted a plan to follow him as he left the Waffle House establishment. Ronald Desenor was the man responsible for the inevitable shooting of Walker, and Michael Dupree served as a getaway driver. Simon's involvement was coming up with the plan itself. All three individuals were jailed without bond. 2 years later, on August 14th of 2015, the three Florida men were sentenced to serve life in prison for the death of Walker. And it's insane to think that these men likely wouldn't have been caught if it wasn't for
wild.
Simon's accidental butt call to 911. Coming up, Florida man collects literal tons of CP. As with any other state in the US, there are many instances of criminals getting busted for CP in Florida. But it seems like in the Sunshine State, the cases are just almost unimaginably bad, such as the instance of the man who literally had tons of CP, as
Like
in the amount of
printed
printed
out?
material literally
Oh,
weighed a
well,
ton.
there you
On
go.
February 23rd of
There you go.
2023, 72-year-old Paul Zittle of Marion County, Florida, was arrested after federal agents discovered thousands of pounds of CP at his home, printed versions of this material. As a result of the sick and bizarre discovery, the man was charged with 25 counts of possession of CP. 1 month
25?
before his arrest, Detective Chase King of the Marion County Sheriff's Office received a tip that CP files had been uploaded online. Upon further investigation, it was revealed that the IP address associated with these disturbing files
Triangulating.
belonged to Zittle. The police were then given a search warrant to raid his home. During the search, detectives uncovered a seemingly limitless amount of disgusting CP photos.
That is
There were other people
ridiculous.
living with Paul at the time, and they explained to police that Paul Zittle would never allow them to go into his bedroom or office without him being with them. Investigators estimate that there were over 220,000 print images in Zittle's possession, a collection that weighed over 2,600 pounds.
God
Some have made the
damn.
comparison online that Paul Zittle's CP collection weighed the same as a Ford Fiesta sedan. Paul's criminal pictures were allegedly stored in large stacks and boxes all over the creep's bedroom and office. After Paul was arrested, he was
would
taken
not
to
wanna
Marion
touch
County
any
Jail and
of
held
that.
on a
Ugh.
$250,000 bond. He's currently awaiting trial, which is set to take place in October of 2023. What really has to be said? If there was a guy that was going to have literal tons of CP, I think this is what he would look like. Let's be real.
I mean,
Coming
like that,
up,
what,
we've got
Herbert
the Florida
in
man that
Family
got
Guy?
a DUI on a
What's his name, the
Walmart
old
motor scooter.
pervert?
Drinking and driving is absolutely terrible. Not only are you
Yes.
putting your own life in danger, you could
Never do
potentially
that.
just kill innocent people. If you thought you could only get a DUI from behind the wheel of a car, boat, or motorcycle, think again. On July 24th, 2022, 39-year-old Aaron Gregory from Melbourne, Florida, was getting rowdy. The man had apparently had some drinks that night and decided to
As
go
you
visit
do.
Walmart. Mr. Gregory got a motorized scooter card, and it said that he had an open beverage and was just driving recklessly around the Walmart at about 5 to 6 miles an hour, just cruising through, running into shelves and almost hitting people. He was just a madman on the loose, I guess. What's important to note, though, is that mobility scooters are considered to be motor vehicles in the state of Florida, so he was committing a crime while doing this.
Yeah, there was
Seeing this
actually
belligerent
somebody-
motorist wreaking havoc in their store
that got arrested like yesterday or something for driving like Power Wheels, like toy or whatever that kids drive. I guess he was like on meth or something and he got pulled over.
Walmart called the cops.
on
When the cops
something.
arrived at Walmart, they found that Gregory had an open bottle of Smirnoff liquor as he was riding around. They noted
Only
that the
the
man had
highest
consumed
quality.
2/3 of the bottle by this point in time. Police also noted that Gregory had, quote, glassy eyes, smelled like alcohol, and refused to take a breathalyzer test. By this point in time, having consumed, almost an entire bottle of Smirnoff, Gregory was pretty fucked up. When the police attempted to speak with the man and obtain
Yeah.
his ID, they noted that he became, quote, unresponsive and couldn't answer any of their questions.
He's drunk as shit. I've been there
Is this your charger?
many,
Yeah?
many
All right.
times.
What?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. No? Is that your backpack? Backpack?
That guy's gone.
Is that your backpack?
Yes.
Yes.
It's fine.
Okay, is that your bottle of vodka? Is
Vodka.
that yours?
Man, he can't hold his vodka.
Is that yours? Came out of your backpack. Watch your back.
Dude, he has no idea what the fuck is happening.
And Gregory wasn't playing up his drunkenness either, as the man's level of intoxication was so high that police had to call medical and escort him out of the store on a stretcher.
Let's go. Come on, spin around. Let's go. We got all day.
Been there.
All right, sit back this way.
Give me your other hand. No. Stay there for a second.
No. The other hand. Dude is so fucking gone. I envy him.
There you go.
I know it over more of Palm Days. Palm Days sucks.
All right, all the way in.
That's not much, I know.
Palm Day.
Nope, in.
Later on at the police department, the man was barely able to stand up and continued to decline any field sobriety tests.
Do you wish to do some field sobriety test? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You willing to provide a breath test?
Are you willing to provide a breath test for me?
Dude, he has no idea where the fuck he is.
Where you blow into a machine? Are you willing to provide a breath test? Would you take that as a no?
Once arrested, he was taken to the Brevard County Jail on a $3,000 bond. 2 months later, Gregory pled no contest to the disorderly intoxication and open container charges. Judge would find Gregory guilty on both misdemeanors and sentenced him to 2 months in jail and instructed him to pay $522 in court costs and fines. Lastly, Gregory was prohibited from going back to that Walmart for 6 months. Next up, we have the Florida man who allegedly groped Little Mermaid. Florida's Disney World amusement park and resort is a world-famous place of magic and wonder, but sadly, it can also be a place of sexual assault and harassment as well. On November 2nd of 2019, 51
I have marched in a Disney World parade. I've gotten to see the behind the scenes. Yeah. It was wild. I saw Snow White smoking a cigarette. She was done. And I get it. I really do.
year-old Brian Sherman was at Disney's Magic Kingdom with his wife when they visited Ariel's
It's the first time I've
grotto.
ever been
At
out
the
of
grotto,
state.
they
too.
asked for a photo with a worker who was dressed as Ariel the Little Mermaid. The woman playing Ariel sat in between Sherman and his wife, and this is where things started
his
to get
wife.
creepy. It's said that Sherman was very excited and told Ariel that she was his favorite Disney princess. He also told Ariel during the photo shoot that he loved her and proceeded to put his arm around the girl, even going as far as allegedly groping the mermaid's breast. During the time of the photo being taken,
His
a
wife
Disney
right there?
co-worker, recognizing the inappropriate touching, attempted to instruct the handsy patron to assume a different pose, perhaps one that didn't involve him touching the poor employee's breast. But this was a fruitless effort. The man wouldn't move his arm. It's important to mention that the victim, the woman playing Ariel in this case, was essentially restrained during this entire alleged assault, as the nature of the chair in Ariel's grotto and the Ariel costume itself, it limited the actor's mobility to a great degree. Also note in this photo that Ariel was essentially pinned in the grotto seat between Brian and his wife. The woman's limited ability to escape the situation makes Brian's alleged assault that much more disturbing. Once the alleged groper was satisfied, Sherman and his wife left the grotto, at which point the victim of his alleged assault started shaking and crying. Around this time, police arrived at the scene, and the woman in the Ariel costume told the cops that she wanted to press charges against the grotto assailant and that she would like to testify in court. The grotto was shut down following this incident. Ironically, the pictures that were taken of the three were used as evidence to arrest Sherman. Several hours after these photos were taken, the man was arrested for battery and was taken to the Orange County Jail. He would be bonded out after $500 was posted. This wasn't the first time of Sherman Sherman being accused of committing a sexual crime. Back in 1999, Sherman was found guilty of, quote, sexual battery of a victim younger than 12. Though, unfortunately for the alleged victim in this Ariel's Grotto incident, there would never be a conclusion to these charges, as about a month after the Grotto incident, the charges levied against Sherman were dropped. The reasons for these charges being dropped, I'm not too certain of. Whatever the case, hopefully the girl in this situation that played Ariel wasn't
Well, his wife was right there. Was she like some kind of fucking
Ariel's Grotto incident
enabler or something? Some
and
weird
here we have the Florida man who was
thing?
released from jail only to be rearrested after attempting to steal from cars in the parking lot. Like, just how? Like, how can you be this dumb? On April 4th of 2019, 37-year-old Michael Casey Lewis of Stuart, Florida, was released from the St. Lucie County Jail after he had been arrested for grand theft. And within 15 minutes of being out, he would reoffend. After being released from jail, Michael Casey meandered around the parking lot, and police say they saw him, quote, acting suspicious and checking vehicle doors. Lewis was also acting belligerent, yelling about how he wanted some cigarettes. When the freshly released man was confronted in the parking lot by police, Lewis stated that he was waiting for his girlfriend to arrive. However, what he had actually been doing was stealing from unlocked cars. Police claim that Mr. Lewis allegedly stole a debit card, 4 packs of cigarettes, an iPhone 7, a Florida driver's license, a lighter, and $547 from a car that was parked in the jail lot. Upon this discovery, Lewis was then rearrested and placed back into the same jail that he had left minutes prior. He was charged with grand theft, burglary, and possession of stolen property. Later in the day, he would be bonded out. And this time, he managed to get out of the parking lot without stealing anything or being rearrested. So good on you, Mr. Lewis. Congrats. Florida man looks for daddy's little girl on Craigslist. Disturbing Craigslist postings have led to the apprehension of many criminals over the years. A lot of them have been from Florida. Yeah. On March 18th of 2018, Warren Arthur Seckler of Boca Raton, Florida, was desperately looking for what he called daddy's little girl. The man was so desperate for such a companion that he put up an ad on Craigslist to find one that fit the bill. The post stated that Seckler was a 62-year-old